So people in rural communities often find that they have their broadband connections, their internet connections aren't as good as they are in urban areas, but they're actually very aware that technology can have a positive impact on their lives, and so they know that they can communicate with their workplace if it's a long way away. They can communicate with relatives who live in the city, and so we wanted to explore how interactive displays could be used rather than the internet and rather than home PCs, which some people have trouble using. So there's particularly elderly people might not be confident to use home PCs and internet websites, things like that. So our idea was that a public display of community-centric content in a kind of public community space would actually be a great way for people to engage with that content.
The approach that we've adopted with this work, which we think is very important to this kind of work, which is one of a user-centered design approach, where we try to involve the users from the outset, and design workshops, for example, and try as well, and it seemed to work really well with the Ray system, of having the community take a sense of ownership. For example, even in that first workshop, we discussed the exit strategy, the fact that we were going to leave the hardware and the software in place, but that ultimately the community would have to look at maintaining that software and hardware.
We put a display in a local shop. So people, anytime somebody went to the shop to buy some milk or some bread, they'd see that display and they'd see the latest content. So there was very good awareness of what was going on and what content was available. And we also tried to make it incredibly easy to use. So it was a very simple touch screen rather than a complicated web browser. So the first display that we put out there was for sharing photos. So we did it. We created a very simple display to start with. It was just a small, medium-sized touchscreen where people could upload photos, essentially, of the village, just to explore how people might use that and to introduce to people some of the issues around displays, because initially they had. It's quite difficult to get people to talk about, public interactive displays when they've never seen one before and they don't know what's technically possible. So it was kind of as a demo or as a technology probe, just to see how people reacted to the technology, and to act almost as a prop to get them talking about it. And I think the way that it worked was largely through seeing other people do it. I think that's another advantage of having something in a public space, is you can see other people using the display, and then you get a sense of what's appropriate and what's permissible, almost. So we worked very closely with one particular person in the community who was she was a rural broadband activist who we worked very closely with, and we refer to her as a champion, essentially, because she would be in the village all the time, promoting the use of this display and telling other people to use it and encouraging them to upload content and just promoting it generally.
But you've got users coming to these displays with different expectations about use, different skill sets, different preferences for interaction, and so it's quite a design challenge to design these interactive systems which on the one hand have general affordances for use and general rules for look and feel and consistency, but on the other hand are flexible enough to support the different preferences of the different users who are ultimately going to come and arrive at the displays.
Well, the long-term aspect of the use was really the reason that we did such a long project, over 4 or 5 years. Because when we first put it in the village shop, we saw a huge spike in, we logged all interaction, and we saw a huge spike in the number of touches on the screen. But that did tail off after a couple of months. But I think we did maintain quite a good level of usage after that for a number of years, and I think the way to do that is to make sure that the content is fresh and engaging, because essentially it's not about interacting with the display, it's about interacting with the content. So as long as there's interesting things on there and new photos and new notices that are relevant to people, I think they'll keep going back and keep using it. And there was, every time that there was a community event, there was an annual village fair. They had an annual scarecrow festival where everybody in the village built a scarecrow and put it outside their house. And each year somebody would go around, take photos of every scarecrow, and then upload it onto the display. So there was this regular influx of very relevant, quite vibrant content. We had interesting things where people from neighbouring villages would come and see the display. And they'd say, well, why has this village got this great thing? Can we have one? How do we get one? And, several people asked me, like, how do I get one of these? It's actually quite difficult to explain that this is a research project. It's not commercially available. But so there's demand for this, I think, in other places. The research results came in two strands, really. The first was how do people interact with displays in a community? And we saw that, that there is a definite, not a need, but there's a role that displays can potentially play in communities, about creating awareness of what's happening and what's happened recently, about supporting history. So a huge number of historical photos of the village were uploaded to the display that had never been shared before. They existed in private collections, and they were digitized for the first time, and they were uploaded for the first time. And having a display there acted as a kind of catalyst for that.
It's highlighted as well, though, the need to maybe be a bit more inclusive regarding the interaction design to enable the full set of community members to submit content. So we were finding that, for example, some elderly members were struggling with the web forms, and so I think an interesting direction to take the research is looking at different means. Again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Some are going to struggle with the web forms. What else can you do? So, again, this could be mundane things like, for example, tailoring the photocopier in the local post office. So it becomes a way that a type of scanner that you just have to put the photo on there and press a button, and that photo appears on the photo display.